All right, our last news story today before we move on to Throwback Thursday. Kind of on brand because we are sticking with Christopher Nolan today, and this is something that has got me oh so excited. Read between the lines on this one, AJ, and think about where this franchise currently is in relation to what Nolan is about to say, because this for me is life-alteringly exciting news. It's something that people have been discussing as a has to happen for a while, but it seems like it could be happening because AJ, Christopher Nolan would love to direct next James Bond movie, but only under the right circumstances. Now, that title alone has got me scrolling because I'm so excited for this, I can't tell you. Christopher Nolan is definitely open to helming a James Bond movie in the future. The Oppenheimer filmmaker has been tied to the franchise as a potential director one day, and he's now admitted taking charge of a 007 blockbuster would be, quote, an amazing privilege. However, he noted there would be a particular set of constraints imposed on him if he did step into the world of Ian Fleming's Spy. Nolan says the influence of those movies in my filmography is embarrassingly apparent, so there's no attempt to shy away from that, he said on the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast. I love films. It would be an amazing privilege to do one. At the same time, when you take on a character like that, you're working within a particular set of constraints. Nolan would want to go into such a massive project at the right moment, where at the right moment, where he can leave his own mark while staying true to the character and the world, with fans wanting to find out who will take over the role from, I won't say his name, the last Bond. I refuse to say his name. He added, and so you have to have the right attitude towards that. It has to be the right moment in your creative life where you can express what you want to express and really burrow into something within the appropriate constraints, because you would never want to take on something like that and do it wrong. It's the kind of responsibility I felt very much taking on Batman. Nolan rose to the challenge with his Dark Knight trilogy, and he'd want to make sure that he had the perfect storm if he was going to take on Bond. He explained, you wouldn't want to take on a film not fully committed to what you could bring to the table creatively. So, as a writer, casting, everything, that's the full package. You'd have to be really needed. You'd have to be really wanted in terms of bringing the totality of what you bring to a character. Otherwise, I'm very happy to be first in line at the cinema to see whatever they do. He's talked about the idea of directing a Bond movie in the past, and he's actually chatted to the producers over the years. I've spoken to the producers Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson over the years. I deeply love the character, and I'm always excited to see what they do with it, he told Playboy back in 2017. Maybe one day that would work out. You'd have to be needed, if you know what I mean. It has to need reinvent. Oh, this is the line that's got me excited. It has to need reinvention. It has to need you. And they're getting along very well. Whew. Come on now. Come on now. AJ, your thoughts on, first off, Nolan directing a Bond and on his words in this article?
I'm weirdly apprehensive. Now, this sounds weird because we've just gone from celebrating the man as the director of the 21st century. But there is a Nolan style. And yes, I can understand his love of technology and time. But I don't know how that lends well to a Bond movie. Now,
Forget
granted,
time.
No, I'm not even looking at time. I'm just looking at a Nolan scope of direction. Now, there's a certain, again, I'm not the biggest Bond freak out there. I've done my Brosnans and I've done the Craigs. Short of that, I've dabbled in your Connerys and your Moores. Do you know what I mean? I can't tell you one from the other. Like, this is why I'm not the perfect guy for the top 10 Bonds. But hear what I'm trying to say. There's a style and a deepness in Nolan which I appreciate, and he could character build. And I'm scared he might go too deep in the character and not enough in the action. Like I'm kind of scared in the build of how it would work. I don't doubt the man can direct. Yeah. Look at Batman. Look at Batman. the Dark Knight trilogy, it took away from we always say it's not a superhero movie, it's a detective movie with a man who happens to be a superhero, right? Now lend that to the Bond world as well. That style gives you something where it's a detective, but I know he works well with gadgets. This is Nolan as opposed to Bond, but I'm just trying to see, and this is going to sound so wrong, the charisma and the action. I don't know if he can deliver it enough. It scares me. Like I know he can deliver in films, but there's something about the charisma of Bond I can't picture being delivered from Nolan. I don't know why, but it just somewhat it's just a few links in the chain that seem to be missing in what should be a perfect a perfect combination. It just slightly scares me.
Boy, I have never, in all our years doing this, disagreed with you more. I cannot imagine anyone on the planet better suited to directing Batman in its current needing
Bond.
of sorry, I cannot imagine anyone on the planet better suited to directing Bond at this particular moment. Nolan said in this article, he will be there when the character needs reinventing. Check. He will be there only if he's allowed writing duties and casting duties. Well, that's kind of necessary given that we're recasting Bond at the moment. Check. He will be there when he feels like he's needed. Well, he's just been responsible for the fourth biggest weekend opening in box office history, along with Barbenheimer. Check. He has, by his own admission, said that the way that the Bond movies have been filmed since the 60s has hugely influenced his style to the degree that it's almost embarrassing, which means that his style is superimposable and transferable onto a Bond. Now, you want to talk about epic action sequences. Think of things like the black hole in Interstellar. Think of things like the bridge scene and the hotel scene in Inception. Think of things like, think of moments of tension, like transfer Batman and Joker to something like Bond and Blofeld. I mean, you don't need Bonds to always be big, bombastic on the action. It needs a bit of that, but it needs to have that in dabbles. You know, some of the great Bond movies, like From Russia with Love, were not heavy on the action. Casino Royale had action scenes, but it wasn't that action heavy. You know, I think this is a match made in heaven, and I can't think of a better time for Nolan to take over the helm of Bond. But yeah, I want to know what you guys all have to say about this. As always, please leave your thoughts and your comments in the comment section down below. And please do like the video. And before you leave us, hit the subscribe button. And before you leave us again, stick around.